Hello and welcome to today's presentation on the future of industrial work, how to develop a sustainable workforce strategy. My name is Matthew Littlefield, President and Research Lead for LNS Research. And I'm joined today with Allison Kuhn, Research Analyst.
Hey, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome. We
are very excited today for today's presentation. I'm going to share a little bit of research. Allison's the star of today's show. She'll be presenting for about a half hour. We'll have a conversation as we go. But please ask questions. I'm going to be monitoring the questions in chat as we go, and looking forward to asking your questions to Allison.
And Matt as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll engage.
I'll key in. I rarely don't. First, before we start, we do want to thank today's sponsors, L2L and QAD Red Zone, both offering market-leading connected frontline workforce applications, and we're happy to have them participating, supporting this research. So some quick housekeeping before we jump in. You will receive a link to the slides via email. I'm sure you're going to be taking lots of screenshots and notes, but please know you will have the materials for yourself after. Please use that chat box in the LinkedIn panel there to ask questions. I will be asking those to Allison. We will save time for Q&A. I will also try and interject some questions as we go. And there will be a quick email post-event survey that we ask you to respond to. We do read those responses, and we do try and improve over time.
And with over 500 people that have registered, please feel free to share some of your best practices or struggles as well in the comment section.
For sure. All right, so for those of you who don't know LNS Research, we are a mission and vision driven company. We always start with a slide, and we really, every day, wake up and go to bed thinking about these things. So we are on a mission to empower industry leaders to transform their organizations. And our vision is one where industrial companies are agile, autonomous, and sustainable. And so that's what we're trying to help you accomplish in your business. And we don't like to just provide research for research's sake. We have an outcome-driven membership model. This includes a structured discovery process to help drive and accelerate those business outcomes that you're trying to accomplish. And we work across a number of industrial sectors, including A&D, automotive, F&B and CPG, life sciences, materials, and chemicals and oil and gas. So really any company that has productive assets, has productive operations, we have research and advice focused on those companies. So the theme of our event in October and everything we're really working to help our customers achieve is this idea of Operation 2030, the journey to Zero Plus, helping companies achieve zero harm, zero waste, zero net carbon, plus step change productivity gains. So this is an important vision for industry, and many of our top members have either this or something similar driving their operations. But it is not easy to achieve these goals. So when you look at the broader market, where are we today? Across all industries, productivity up and to the right. So this is labor productivity across all industries going back 40 years. And it is a nice, straight, relatively straight curve up and to the right. And when you look across Industry 3.0 and Industry 4.0, that trend has continued nicely. Unfortunately, in the manufacturing sector, and really through a cruel twist of fate with the launch of the idea of Industry 4.0, starting in 2012, I think the first paper was announced in 2011. A lot of the pre-work was in the 2010 timeframe. Productivity has plateaued. It has flatlined. It has stalled. There are a host of reasons for this. A number of those we're going to talk about today, and especially around labor and productivity and creating a sustainable frontline workforce. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And for any of the members we saw that had already registered, please feel free to put in the comments where, you've seen some help from LNS Research. We've got a great audience, and our goal is, as Matt said, to really not just help our members, but the industry as a whole. So it's great to have such a wide industry vertical presence here today with us.
Great. Thanks, Allison. And so when you look at those numbers there, those are based on 2012 numbers with an index at 100 for 2012 numbers. we today in 2023 are actually less productive than we were in 2012, which is a shock to most companies, but is actually true. And where has this come from? What has driven it? And this just shows a little bit more of the details behind those numbers. So the green line is overall productivity, or overall labor force. The blue line is overall output from that labor force in the manufacturing sector. And the red line is productivity, same line from the past slide. And you can see coming out of the COVID recession, we threw a lot of labor at manufacturing, right? There was a thirst for goods, for hard goods, and we really ramped up our hiring and retained talent. So there was a lot of good that happened, and we're back on trend. Unfortunately, hiring outpaced productivity gains and output, and so productivity itself has fallen. And so we see a number of challenges driving this productivity plateau. One is labor skills and knowledge gaps. So if you look at previous recessions, right, starting back in the early 90s through the early 2000s to the Great Recession in 2008 to 2010, manufacturing is a cyclical industry. In all of those recessions, we cut labor and we did not replace that labor. So it was been on a long-term decline. Unfortunately, through the labor, through the recession of 2008, 2009, we cut too deep. You couple that with the retirements that happened in 2020, from 2010 to 2020, we lost not only labor, but we lost the skills, the talents, the adaptive capacity. I see Mike here making some comments on the ability of those companies to address challenges faced by them. And so that's a top of a top challenge, Allison.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, right? Have we just thrown money and/or people at the problem? We're not retaining them. We're having issues. So have we really changed what we're doing, or are we just really trying to get people in the door to keep our operations running?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So it's not just people. There is process and technology issues here as well. So traditional management systems, right, defining the roles, the responsibilities, the way we solve problems, the way we form teams, the way that we run our businesses, in many ways, we have hit the limit of those management system approaches. We have not embedded advanced problem solving. We have not really thought through how do we take that to the next level. And we'll talk about that a little bit today. It is intertwined with this idea of the future of industrial work and that future workforce, but it's a really critical issue, right? As you improve, each one of those incremental improvements is harder to achieve than the last, right? So over time, you hit that limit of effectiveness, and many companies we see actually stagnating here. And the final piece is technology, and this is where the productivity paradox comes in, and many manufacturers are guilty of this. You can have new technology, you can have new approaches, but if you do the same things you did in the past, just using new technology, you get no productivity improvement. It sounds obvious, but so many companies we see take a paper-on-glass approach. Maybe they were using an on-premise legacy software to measure OEE. 20 years later, they use a new cloud-based AI solution to measure OEE in the same way. And when you take that approach to deploying new technology without changing the people and process capabilities, we get exactly what we're seeing here, this productivity plateau. One final point, and this is some new research that we're working on. It's not just labor productivity. When you go and you look at the National Safety Council and you look at injury rates, especially serious incident rates, from the 70s right to 2010, right, it's coming down, and we as an industry have flatlined on safety. If you look at product recalls, right, and there's not great data on product recalls, you have to go to FDA, you have to go to automotive, you have to go to consumer goods, so it's distributed across different government bodies. But when you look at that data, same story. So this idea of the journey to zero plus, this connection between productivity, quality, labor, and sustainability, they all tie together, and unfortunately, they are all plateauing at the same time for the past 10 years.
Yeah. Existing resources won't be placated for long with these changes, and the next gen workforce will come, but can you keep them past the 90 days?
Yeah, when you show this vision of plateauing, right, depends on your perspective. Yeah. Is that an organization or industry I want to join? In some ways, there's great opportunity. For other ways, if you don't and are not willing to change to address that plateau, you're going to push away some of those problem solvers pretty quickly. Yeah. The good news. So we've been tracking this idea of industrial transformation since 2015. So we see industrial transformation as much broader than just the application of smart manufacturing Industry 4.0 technologies. It is the idea that you will transform the entire way that you manufacture, moving towards autonomous, sustainable manufacturing, which has impacts on the way you design products, the way those products are designed, the way that you manage supply, plan for demand, and deliver value to customers. So it is really a broad-based transformation. And luckily, more and more manufacturers are seeing it that way. More and more manufacturers have initiatives around these ideas. And the thing I see most important here and encouraging is the shrinking of skeptics. So there's still a lot of companies in those planning phases, but over half the industry actively has initiatives here. And the skeptics and the naysayers really are limited at this point.
And in general, the geographic differences where folks may have thought that, the Asia Pacific market, right, we're not really transforming as much for the sake of people. I believe that's our research shows absolutely that's not true. Mm-hmm. And those verticals that think that we don't have an issue with labor, they do. They're just not admitting it yet.
Exactly. This is not just a U.S. issue. This goes across industries and across
that's
geographies.
Right.
Okay, and so some of our research into industrial transformation shows that this is not just a single initiative. Hopefully, this is not just a technology initiative, that this is really sponsored by the senior-most executive leading operations and the make functions, that they are thinking about it strategically, that they have nominated talent and teams to own this across people, process, technology, across functions, and really drive multiple sub-initiatives as part of industrial transformation. And really starting back in 2018, that started as this idea of connected worker. Very early on, it was wearables, hardware-centric. As we got into that 2020, 2021, especially with the emergence of COVID, right, it emerged into new software tools to support. But because of all the reasons that we just talked about, just deploying new software to do the same things as you were doing before does not deliver benefits. So you have to take this beyond just a technology initiative and think about it as what we call the future of industrial work, which Allison has been leading as our research initiative in this space. And so it is much more than just technology. It's really how you build the team and organizations and change processes to support these challenges and new approaches. Yeah. So with that, I will pass it to Allison to take us through some of her new research in this space. Thank you.
Perfect. And I can say that after over 20 years in industry, I can look at that chart and know that, it was teams like LNS Research who was helping us understand where we needed to go. And at Dow, we had Dow 4.0 initiatives where we were on the cutting edge of looking at some of the new technologies. We had not yet, though, really started to change the way in which we operated. So we got some value. Initially, our workforce enjoyed that information in the field, but they still felt like it was still very much business driven. These technologies were truly out there to watch them and their performance and provide the business what they needed. It was not out there to truly empower and help support the workforce. So with all of that expertise, as well as working with our industrial clients today, as well as being able to engage out at other events, we've really been able to find new great ways of seeing how, honestly, manufacturing's just not sexy anymore, Matt. I mean, if you look, over 80% of employees today have no desire to come to work in manufacturing. What's more concerning and what's more scary, honestly, is that over 70% of those within industry do not recommend manufacturing as a career. That's a problem.
I mean, I think it's very telling when we work with senior executives. Many of those are at the stage where their kids themselves or in high school, maybe in college, maybe thinking about that first job,
Yeah.
are you recommending your company or your industry to your own children? And for generations, the answer to that question was yes. Today's generation of, if I'm a leader of manufacturing, I'm, in that 40, 50, 60-year-old demographic, a lot of them aren't recommending manufacturing to their kids anymore.
They aren't. And David, I can tell you for a fact, you and I might think manufacturing is sexy. I love my PPE and climbing up a tower, but the data doesn't support it. I can't tell you the last time I met with an industry executive or industry leaders where their children have gone into manufacturing. There may be 1 out of every 10. So unless we start trying something today, since we didn't start yesterday, we need to start working, because 72% of us right now already show that we have operational issues. We cannot attract our workers into the field. The retention rates are astronomical, and we're losing it on the line. Our operational performance losses are high. We cannot meet our production needs. We can't meet our customer needs. So I need folks like you who understand manufacturing is, excuse my language, dang sexy.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to tell you why and how you can send that message so that way we get our brand back as a career of choice. So right now we know that manufacturers are struggling. We have not found a way across industry to manage this significant workforce crisis and be able to hire, retain, and then honestly understand, what does the next gen really need? We're always fighting issues with the budget. So it's not about throwing money at the problem, Matt. It's really not. Mm-hmm. We need to really look at how we can change ourselves, our core DNA and how we work. So just to give you a feel for where this data comes from and how strong it is, we have over 300 respondents that are from across industry size, geography, and we went out and looked for what are the business priorities and challenges that you have today? What types of financial, operating, and hiring KPIs do you use? Mm-hmm. If you don't monitor it, you're not tracking and you won't know where you're at. And last, the strategies, practices, and what type of capabilities are being deployed across not just the technology we've been so focused on with Industry 3.0, but the people and the processes. Technology for Industry 3.0 was all new, revolutionary, but we realized we forgot the people.
It's so true. So many of the metrics and dashboards that have been built in manufacturing in the past 20 years have been process and use case specific, mm-hmm. and have not focused on people. I mean, many of the executives we work with, you start and you'll show some of the data. You look at hiring, retention, performance and training metrics. Mm-hmm. They have no idea even what their performance is, never mind
no clue
how that applies to the financial metrics or the cost of a lack of performance of those metrics. There's a lot of work to be done just on those people metrics.
So dashboards are good, but you already have the data. So okay, you have it in a new visual. Mm-hmm. Some of the cheapest things that I did was engaging folks and using even the thermometer approach. Here's where we're at against mm-hmm. our metrics. Mm-hmm. And if you can believe, I got ourselves out of a pretty hot compliance bind, specifically just by sharing where we're at. And then they proactively said, well, here's some things that we really struggle with and would help.
Yeah, I mean, what's the typical people metric in a plant? You walk in, it's LTAs, right? Or some type of safety metric. That's there.
Yeah. Which is important, but that's reactive. If people knew what they needed to do and how to do it right to get the outcome every time, you're going to have a safer operation.
Yeah.
You're going to have a more reliable plant.
And they don't go beyond safety, right? And a lot of what you're going to talk about is that full employee life cycle, supporting those employees, and just making them safe is just the down payment on that full caring and supporting of the life cycle.
As far as I'm concerned, we need to send our workers home better than which they came, mm-hmm. not with just, because we're sending them home to pay. That's basic and fundamental. If you're not doing that, then there's so many other things we can do. So we've just given you some teasers as to what we're going to get into. But first I want to talk about our maturity model that we have at LNS. Here recently I've finished the Future of Industrial Work maturity model and already have assessed some companies, and What that means for those companies is we're able to use a data-based approach to really showing where that company is on adopting those best practices across the levels of maturity, and identify really what are your strengths and where are your growth opportunities. So it really pulls that bias off and removes those blinders to help you see what you think is working and what you think is done. So if we really look and understand where we're at, we can really help identify that business case and develop a true roadmap that's going to help us get from those first 3 stages: ad hoc, incubate, improve, which are vision focused. It's important we have a vision, but we really need to look at helping that hard part of really crossing the chasm and getting into scale and embed, which is where the true value is. So if we look at the business practices across our elements, you'll see here it is the leadership, the culture, and competency, which really focuses on the people. We look at the management systems, the agility, and the risk that is focused on those processes. And then last, the data analytics, the applications and platforms, and infrastructure and connectivity that are the technology focus. And as you can see, level 1, that's the very middle band, you can see that the initial approach is on risk and compliance, which is again basic and foundational, but it's also looking towards the competency, which is very important, but we need to grow that significantly more to deal with the significant labor shortage and the gap in skills. And as we see, as the maturity across the market increases, we can see that we start seeing a lot more efforts to really grow outside of the areas and focus more on the cultural side to make it part of our DNA. We start moving into the data and analytics, so that way we make sure we use our technologies and make more data-based decisions. As manufacturers, we are very gut sensitive. I can't tell you how many people I've seen that have actually used their finger and literally dipped it to see if we've made on-spec product or where the problem is. Now, we're facing lawsuits, right, between asbestos and other things, and that's a safety issue. But how do we actually provide data-driven insights to help make the decisions that are going to be what's needed and repeatable for the future? So our maturity assessment process guides and helps customers and members and industrials, regardless of where they're at within this maturity, and build those skills that's going to meet current but future needs across the workforce. And it pays, Matt. If we look here at the metrics, if we look at even those that are within the vision phase of focus, we see that they're achieving over 50% higher operational performance when compared to those ad hoc organizations who are not focused yet or doing anything really for workforce initiatives. If we look at level 4 and 5, which is the most mature companies that have reached this level, we're seeing 55% higher performance across those operational KPIs. Who wouldn't want on-time delivery? Customers won't come to you unless you can give it on time. OEE, if you don't have assets and the asset capacity running properly, you're not going to be able to make the product. And we all know what supply chain challenges have done. New Orleans Airport was out of salad, they were out of hamburgers, they were out of everything. So these are the different things that we want to work with to help manufacturing be able to get these materials.
A couple thoughts on this, Allison. A lot of companies we work with think they're farther behind than they are, which is it's a good and bad thing. A lot of times they are in that level 2 and 3, but think that they're ad hoc and haven't even started yet. That ad hoc group is huge. That's like half the market almost when you look at how many companies are in there. And a lot of those 2 and 3 level companies they're like 75% of the quartile kind of place.
Yeah. So ad hoc actually is much fewer. In fact, if we look at the vision focused, it's actually right around just under 50%. So we do have more within the vision focused. But the good and bad of that is just because you've started something doesn't mean that you've, one, developed the foundational needs to sustain it. But two, if you truly don't understand the bigger picture of future of industrial work, you're not going to be able to navigate that strategy and make sure that the initiatives are achieving the business value that we've been held to for so many years. But now more and more, especially with sustainability and ESG requirements, the human capital and the people are what's going to make or break not only that performance payout for executives at all levels, but is also going to be the requirement for stakeholders that are going to be investing in you. So it's more about how do we keep the doors open? To keep the doors open, you need people. So how do we make sure that the people is the focus, which is a true enabler to our business value and metrics? If you help the people understand what you need and where you're going, they're the strongest in order to get us there.
There's an interesting question that's showing up here from Raphael on why OEE of all these stays flat, or at least within the margin of error for this study.
Will you give the politically correct?
Well, yeah. Well,
Before
so a couple of thoughts on that. One, OEE is a metric that many manufacturers have measured for a long time and have been focused on and optimized. So the level there in general is relatively high compared to other metrics because it's relatively easy to measure and often has been a focus of some of those low mature companies, I would say. Another reason, maybe the less politically correct reason, is it is a metric that is very susceptible to manipulation within an organization, does not clearly tie to financial benefits. And because of those factors, you may not see the improvements in OEE that you may think you'll see, but they will come out in other areas and other metrics of the business.
So Matt's giving me a tip to say, please don't get so off politically correct, but I have to give manufacturing answer. Which you see there for level 1 and likely for level 2, 3 as well, is cooking the books. Okay, let's admit it. You've got a lot of folks, a lot of plant leaders and folks that are looking for that next job, and they are going to find ways of making sure that they can recategorize downtime, outages, and unplanned events so that their OEE numbers stay great. In fact, some of our folks will actually, with a straight face, admit up in the 90s, and some have even come 100 or higher, which I don't know how you get higher than 100% OEE. But what you see there is, well, for example, we really had an outage coming up in 2 weeks for that compressor. So it really doesn't count against OEE because we decided to start fixing it. Oh, but you weren't ready. So again, if you don't compare apples to apples, if you don't have standardized management systems and then a check to make sure that you're actually reporting fairly, you're going to have folks that are going to tell you your OEE is great. And that honestly, when I see high OEE numbers, that actually indicates to me a very immature process. It shows me that leadership is more focused on the business rather than reporting what the business is doing, rather than actually delivering what the business should.
Yeah, there's a lot of research, and I don't want to spend too much time on OEE, but shows that whatever metric you take, and if you just look at it as a secondary metric to show if you were improving or not, it may be a good metric. But as soon as you make it the target, and especially if you tie bonus or other financial impact to that metric, it no longer becomes a good indicator of overall health of the business because you over-optimize on this one thing. So keep that in mind as you pick your metrics and your compensation packages.
People are incredibly smart. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes.
So I'll refer to the LNS blog. Our research analyst, Niels, wrote a recent piece on OEE. So please, Niels, I've seen you on. If you could post that blog link, that would be great. But let's move on to business objectives, right? Why is there a difference, or is there a difference in business objectives? Our focus is always the signage, zero injuries, or we're focused on zero injuries, we focus on how do I do more with less, and a lot of the less ends up being people a lot, if you notice. You don't hear how do I do less with technology or less, equipment. And then also this new hire retention. Yes, it's a big issue, but folks, these are reactive issues. If you look at the followers and the staggering look at the specific goals and those objectives, those are all reactive issues. So if your goal is to fix a reactive issue or a problem, as opposed to what leaders are doing, they're focused on proactive, right? What are the things that I need to do proactively that's going to achieve my business results, or better, actually? It completes the entire package. So here we see that there is absolutely a skilled labor shortage, and we have opportunities across, but focusing on upskilling employees, digitally enabling the employees, appealing to the employees. Matt, do you see a trend there? Employees?
I think people should focus on people. Yeah.
People. Yeah. Wow. So people should be the huge focus for the future. And when we look further at these leaders who are very focused on people, they are very specific 3 strategic imperatives that are really frontline, future-proofing and transforming operations. The first one that we can see is that it's all again about the people, and not just specifically people, but reimagining that employee life cycle to support and serve the front lines. Our life cycle hasn't worked, and we've known it for years, honestly, but we've continued as we have quote unquote more experienced folks rising into the leadership reins, thinking as in the past, well, this will get better, this is temporary. I hate to say it, but man, this new generation absolutely is not going to make this go away. But honestly, those that are within the working range of 30 to 50, these folks also realize what is possible, and they also won't continue to stand for these broken life cycles. The same things we provide for our white collar versus the blue collar. So the second one is meeting employees where they are. They don't wear collars. We've been doing so much for a very small, significant portion of our population. 20% of manufacturing is made up of those back office, quote unquote, white collar employees. So how do we prioritize leadership and culture across the front line, which is 80% of our workforce around average, and honestly critical? While we have seen strikes and other things where leadership goes and runs the lines for a short amount of time, tell me how much you can actually get out without people to man or woman those machines and get products out. And last, innovation and our new digital technology is really the lifeblood of transformation. But what's really unique is understanding and truly being able to put people within the technology. So human-centric technology that is actually designed for and used by the front line as opposed to the business operations. And they do both.
Yeah, when we started this research, this was not what I thought was going to come out of it, but much of the insight you're going to be talking about is really taking the things that we've been doing for the back office, backlines for the last 20 years, and taking that mindset and those benefits and those approaches. And it's not just a lift and shift. You do have to tailor those to the front lines, but taking those concepts and approaches and democratizing it. That's the key, I think, as you'll see.
Yeah. And you even see some of those companies that are typically known to be laggers. I can say Valero already has programs in place that are more towards that technical / more frontline efforts to help them gain the leadership skills that are needed, which are empowering and engaging them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point on sort of the laggards versus leaders. A lot of the leaders who have prioritized people over time and maybe have really mature work systems and methods of work and have really high performance in these areas, they're ripe for disruption because it's harder for them to build the business case. It's harder for them to move forward into this new paradigm because they've already gotten so far on the old paradigm. And so I do think that there will be some leapfrogging here from folks who are really, really challenged that truly reimagine how they approach these areas.
Yeah. I can say, of course, I have a little bias coming from Dow Chemical, but it was a huge honor to be able to lead as a coach for our Lead to Exceed for the leadership. And, you know, people were very surprised when they showed up, and the focus was, yes, catalyzing transformation, but a big focus was on work-life balance and saying you're burning yourselves out. But where have we applied that to our front lines in general? We haven't really. So I think even folks that are leading need to realize that, okay, it's still a lot of work to truly roll across and understand how to do that across your hourly workers.
Yeah, and I like your idea of breaking this distinction between blue collar, white collar, or salaried or not. Because, you know, if you're a supervisor, a manufacturing or department manager at a facility, you are on the front lines and feeling a lot of those same frontline stresses. And why do you pick a company to work for? It's often your direct boss, right? And so if you're not as corporate supporting those supervisors, it flows all the way down.
Yeah, we need to work together. And when we look and start looking at our specific Future of Industrial Work framework, we're going to look at the 3 different pieces that talk to those 3 strategic imperatives. And the first is the total employee experience. And it's really not, again, only the front lines, because they work together. If you're so focused on the front lines and what you're doing is cutting back on some of your salaried and more technical, I see a lot of folks taking moves and reducing the amount of engineering support, right? Back office support. All you're doing is making it even worse because the front lines go to those folks for support. So as you see up here on the screen now, the total employee experience is absolutely mission critical for making sure employees are overall happier, and reimagining that employee life cycle is critical. If we look at, you know, from the eyes of the employee, do I even want to work here? Do they give me something I enjoy doing, meaningful work? So get away from that non-value added work. The wellness programs, you know, that's why there's a lot there. How many are actually extended to the front lines? So a lot of them have it, but don't always include the front lines. For one, job flexibility. That is so incredibly mutually exclusive between manufacturing front lines and the job flexibility. But there's newer technology and tools where, you know, they're able to swap shifts better. Facility management. I lived in the basement of the paper mills in college, and it was atrocious. You know, warehouses. Here we have, you know, nice, wonderful corporate offices and such, but, you know, we're really not investing in the facilities, and it honestly looks like it should be condemned. And I've actually had an organization in a condemned building before that I continue to use. So reimagining that employee life cycle is huge. And then servant leadership, as you mentioned.
Okay, but before you dump too much on that one, sorry to interrupt, I do want to talk about job flexibility a little bit, because I think there's a win-win on that. We've had some recent briefings on companies in the manufacturing space that are reimagining the traditional production line and using advanced technology, right? AGVs, robotics, moving towards modular cell-based manufacturing and moving those things much closer to the source of consumption for a lot of those sustainability reasons you like to talk about and many of us believe in. And so there's a win-win there. If you can use those changes in the manufacturing network to support some of the things you want to do on the employee experience, I think there's a nice win-win where it's not just the 12-hour shift or the 8-hour shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. kind of deal.
Absolutely. And having them, you know, helping with that, you know, making sure that the transferable skills and the information that they have, they can better manage and know actually how to make it to where they can be more flexible in those roles. Very smart as far as understanding how they can move. So listening to the workforce is key.
And before you move on again, I saw Brian from OC asked a question there. There's a lot on this wheel, on this life cycle. Any thoughts, recommendations on where to start for employees?
Ooh, I do. So we're going to get into some very specific recommendations here as soon as we finish reviewing this framework. But with the time we have available, we may have to have a follow-up LinkedIn Live, but we're always available and our blogs are coming out.
I think there is an insight from that maturity assessment that you did and where folks start, I don't think folks are starting with technology. I think folks are really starting with the culture and competency and the management systems. You've got to get those things right first. The one place they do start on the technology side is the data and analytics, because you do want to have some of those insights, because if you're going to make changes in the way you structure your management system or your culture, you need some you want those decisions to be data-centric decisions.
Yes.
And then start moving on to some of those other technology areas.
Yeah. But as Matt said, servant leadership in this move, reimagining how we do things, is essential to first embrace and understand the need for flexibility. And these processes that we're seeing that are being built by the servant leadership capabilities is what in the end is going to be driving it. So we do have some very specific capabilities as well as actions to help improve that flexibility across the front line and meet the autonomous needs. Because as you said, people don't leave work typically. We are leaving workplaces, but they leave work bosses. So it really has to have that whole new approach.
And I saw Neil's made a comment there, which I fully support. In our transformation framework, the starting point is business objectives, right? And you have to have a real clear idea of what those are. Then next comes the strategic initiative, like something like this, the future of industrial work. And so you have to ask yourself some of those questions, right? Is operating these assets, is manufacturing the make function a competitive advantage for our company? Is it something that we're going to be outsourcing more over time, right? Is this a problem that we want to make somebody else's problem? Those are really important questions to make sure you have answered.
Yeah. If we think back through years past, right, we had to create new roles and new organizations to really support this transformational needs that we had. So here we're going to have to start seeing new roles and absolutely collaboration, specifically between, this is not just an operations problem. We need to have HR and other systems, the sustainability and ESG, which are also reinventing roles, reinventing organizations to meet the needs. These are the teams that need to come together with your IT/OT systems in order to make the full picture of making it grow. So it's completely changing how we've looked at leadership in our organizations to date.
I think that's really important, Allison. The IT/OT piece has been a big issue, challenge, and source of benefit for companies if they get it right for many years, and source of value loss if they get it wrong. We're now seeing this HR operations collaboration. And just like with IT/OT, there is not a single answer for all companies. You really have to look at the skill sets and capabilities of those teams and think about how to bring those teams together, right? Some groups in the IT world and OT world have really strong sets of manufacturing experience, understanding, and can partner effectively. The same thing we're seeing in HR, right? Do they understand the front lines? Because they understand how to manage and build an employee life cycle. Operations folks don't typically have that understanding or background.
Right.
Sometimes HR, they're too far away and they don't understand, and so you've got to take some of these things into the operations group, or sometimes you can partner with between operations and HR.
With learning and development and those technical expertise, that's where the true value is going to be. And the worst thing that leadership can do is see, look how much money they're saving when they do this. So we're automatically going to cut your budgets to help motivate these changes. You got to have money and or reutilize the budget differently instead of just cutting it. So if we look at specifically how we're empowering the culture with these significant changes across manufacturing, command and control, over 30% of industrial organizations are just handing work to the workforce, do this, do that, at this time, come back, ask for more, repeat. It's got to change. With the amount of flexibility and autonomy being offered, we have work offerings where you get paid that same day by cashing out. Why would you have somebody who want to go into work at a certain time be completely restricted to job flexibility when you can have somewhere that uses technology? You can drive and pick up and deliver things, make your own schedule, do things in between. You know, this is the type of thing we're competing with in a diminished labor market. So truly changing that leadership approach to more of a servant leadership that's going to actually support the workforce and have it supported in a way that it is built into the core. As you can see here in the life cycle, management systems and processes are essential. So yes, it's all about people, the leadership and culture, but the way we implement and move into this leadership, servant leadership change is through the processes. We need to make sure we have the leadership commitment, but the performance management systems, talent management, knowledge management for competencies is all critical for truly engaging and making sure that the workforce comes, trains, and stays and wants to see a future. We are not going to get back to the 30-year manufacturing career, those folks that are retiring after 50 plus years on the line. That mobility across employees is at an all-time high. That's not changing. So how do we transform ourselves to meet that?
Yeah, I think a couple things that I've seen on the servant leadership side. One is actually asking the opinions of the folks that we're talking about here, right? And so many companies don't do that. But then if you do it, are you listening and changing because of it? And so one example that I've seen is the idea of childcare. And how do we address childcare issues? And we've seen some industrial companies starting to bring those childcare sites on site and provide that as a service because they knew that was a challenge for their workers. Their workers didn't actually want to bring their kids to the site for childcare. They would have just liked a childcare credit. So they were trying, but they sort of missed a little bit because they weren't asking specifically enough, not asking the second question. So it is important to really try and understand some of those frontline challenges and issues and support them in the way they want to be supported, not supporting them in the way you necessarily want to support them.
Yeah. And it's almost not even a desire. I have 3 young children. Childcare post-COVID, they're down 30 to 40% of workers. The cost of childcare has staggered because of that. So you have less facilities, less workers. It is a must now to figure out because we've moved so far away from our communities to be safer, but we've created another problem, or we've created an opportunity to help in our retention. So that can be a huge game changer for folks.
Another one I see quite a bit on servant leadership is this idea of upskilling and celebrating the wins. So in a lot of manufacturing, I still see celebrate all the time, the celebrations of the 50, 60, 75-year employee. Those are great, but if you're trying to attract and retain new talent, that is not what they see as their future. And so you want to celebrate the person who had no manufacturing experience, came in, and then 3 years later got a promotion, or 5 years later got a promotion, maybe even out of the company to a different company, but a better, more highly skilled job. And if you can show and celebrate those wins more than just the 50-year anniversary employees, it'll resonate more, I think.
Let's get away from just meet our new people who sometimes they publish after they've left even. Why don't we start celebrating a 90-day, or hey, they finished their onboarding program. Hey, these folks have met their first year. I've never seen more folks that enjoyed our small events to say, here are the folks that have hit the year, and then we've had, 3-year milestones and 5-year milestones. It goes a long way. So it doesn't necessarily mean promotion. It doesn't have to be something that's monetary. It's recognizing and showing, hey, things are changing. People need examples, and that's a very positive example. And they can go to that person and say, hey, I'm struggling here. Why are you still here? Let's start looking at those things internally. Every place is different, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. But when we look at technology, and when we say it's not a one-size-fits-all, digital technology is and will be a critical part of transformation, not just achieving it, but sustaining it. And if we look at, it's not just, again, how do we provide the digital technology and connect them, but how do we truly look at it from that total employee experience and really transform the way we've done? Not just handing a super cool gadget or something different. I mean, if all you're doing is moving away from a hard copy, a clipboard, or the need to stop a job and to go back, which by the way, that kind of helps them sometimes. Now they get a mini break and can get a cup of coffee or chat about the LSU Tigers winning the championship game. So that's not necessarily a bad thing that they have to go back. It may help productivity, but look at really how is it truly changing the way they're able to do their job, and how is it helping them say, hey, well, now I don't have to, even if I go back to my office, I don't have to go to between 10, 15 systems to find out, how do I find the pump seal information? Is it in stock? How do I change it? Are there new updates to it? So what are some of the things that can give you specific work execution support? So one, from the digital knowledge management, these systems can help build, but looking at that work execution support, is it giving that personalized information specifically to that employee based off of where they're at in the learning curve? But honestly, this collaboration and that workforce competency management is actually even giving the frontline more control over their own career development and talent development. Not only maybe to be more mobile outside of the company, but even be aware of other opportunities within the company. When systems start showing you what is the highest needs for overtime, or what are some of the most critical unmet needs of skills, they can start working towards that. The company in the end has employees that are happier because they may stay, they may leave, but they know they're more valuable, and they can also be more agile across the front lines. So these data analytics built into these connected workforce applications is huge. Technologies and platforms have become significantly more mature, better at connecting across the operating system, eliminating silos, and truly doing amazing things. So I'm really excited that our research coming up is going to focus on, why is this such a critical piece? How do we navigate the solutions out there, and how do we understand what use cases do they offer now, but making sure it's flexible to meet future needs, because we have to move away from point source solutions.
One thought on the technology landscape and how it's matured over the last few decades. A lot of traditional technology categories in manufacturing have not focused on user personas. They have focused on work processes and use cases. So if I'm an ERP system or a PLM system or MES system, I'm managing a work process with use cases within it, and then the users sort of hang off. And the user experience is not always great. There is business value to that approach, and the system overall may be better, but when you start thinking about that user, you realize their experience has not been optimized necessarily.
You hear super user and you see people running. You don't want to be a super user.
Exactly. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the Connected Frontline Workforce application space, because they really take a user persona approach. And some of the analytics providers out there, they're looking at specific user personas, right? And so even if I am an application that is targeting the front lines, the way that a supervisor versus an operator versus a mechanic versus an electrician versus a reliability engineer versus a process engineer versus a continuous improvement person are all different.
Yeah.
And so I want to be looking towards application providers that understand those differences, and I want to be building teams internally, either my own resources or third-party resources, that have user experience skill sets as part of them, right? To really optimize these things.
And using that emerging technology. Okay, let's just hit on AI that is just blown up, right? I wrote a blog recently about, AI and this big commotion. AI is not anything new, but the way these connected frontline workforce applications is applying AI is being significantly new and using it in a different way. So as you look here at the framework, and know we're about to hit into the Q&A part, so please start dropping in your questions now. If we don't have time to hit it today, trust me, we'll make sure that we follow up. But again, your counter folks who are here, we have a lot of people here. They may answer you as well as I'm seeing. So we're going to hit our last few slides on just some, okay, so when it comes down to it, what are some more specific actions that I should be doing as a manufacturer? We've given you a taste, but again, if you're really looking at truly changing your workforce situation and the issues, if you're looking to hit 2-3 times the opportunities here, I mean, look at this. On average, leaders are exceeding their goals 2 or more times. But that recruitment number and attendance 3 times as much, this means that our data shows that they not only can recruit them, but they come to work. That means they want to be there, which means that they're much more highly likely to stay. Training 3 times higher. And again, that basic performance, instead of that stagnated, they're increasing their EHS performance and productivity. So how do you develop? Here's some tips that we're going to talk to right now and then get into some of our more specific questions. But first, you have to integrate future of industrial work initiatives across other initiatives and programs. It is no longer a choice. If you're talking about surviving versus continuing to operate your own assets, you've got to focus on the people. But it's not just that focus on the people, but specifically how you're focusing. What are the things you're doing for the total employee experience? And don't just think about the recruiting and bringing them on. If you aren't understanding offboarding, which will be your reality for the next years, there's no longer 30-year careers. It will be a celebration if you can get them to 3 to 5 years, and we may do better at that. But right now we're having less than 2 years turnover, and it's getting even more. And these aren't new to manufacturing. We're seeing folks that have been in manufacturing for years that are now mobile and moving and keep moving. As Matt said, proactively collect that feedback. Yes, you're doing things. Yes, you think you may be seeing value, but to truly accelerate the shift, you have to have that checks and balance to make sure that the people feel it's employee eccentric. Implementing new frontline management approaches and that empower the workforce. If we don't move away from command and control, we're going to be moving away from operations, from manufacturing. I guess the good news is we won't have as many goods for those to deliver in those highly flexible jobs outside of manufacturing, but it just may mean it may change geographies. So United States, for instance, if we're looking at reshoring, if we can't keep our factories filled, again, we've got to change, and especially other cultures and geographies that have very different approach to command and control in the workforce. Identifying and adopting those process capabilities to enable the employees is huge. So, and we're not just talking about have a process documented, right? But how do we truly look at the way we do things now and reinvent them to where we have processes in place that are absolutely changing the core DNA of how we train, we develop, and how we maintain those frontline workforce, which can even be folks that are joining your HR systems from the front line, because we need not just our technical experts and SMEs to grow up within the ranks, but with this issue, this now opportunity for folks to move to different organizations. And then the technology, again, I cannot stress how important it is for the technology to digital connect, the newer technology and applications. But again, it's at the bottom specifically because we've got to move away from this technology-based focus.
Great. Thanks, Allison.
Yes.
Really appreciate it. I tried to give as many of those questions as I could as we were going. Just a couple thoughts before I ask a few final questions. I did see a number of LNS Research members on the line and participating. Thank you. If you want to dive deeper into any of these topics, please work with your account managers, and we're happy to have those conversations. I saw some new faces as well, which is great to see. Also happy to dive in and have some introductory discussions around this research and how it can apply to your businesses. We also have our conference, the IX event in Chicago, October 17th, 18th, and 19th. This will be one of the highlights of the show, so please attend there as well. Allison, give you final word and thoughts. You covered a lot, the 3 different areas of the future of industrial work bringing together those three different wheels. When you think about the chief operating officer, the VP of operations, I think a lot of those folks are executive sponsors of these initiatives. They see this as an existential threat to the business,
Yes.
but maybe they haven't fully taken on this idea of servant leadership and getting out there to the sites on an ongoing basis. So maybe just end with some recommendations and thoughts on how those senior leaders can really embrace this idea of servant leadership and changing the business.
Yeah, I'll see a lot of your leaders have embraced the senior leadership and servant leadership attitude, but we've got to get away from the 20%, folks. So it's time to get out there, get your boots on, call me if you need help. I love strapping up my PPE and getting out there. You've got to move beyond the white collar. You've got to engage. Being an executive sponsor and speaking at the high level is one thing, but people are looking for you to put your money where your mouth is. And that means that they see, feel, and hear from even those that have left your organization that you truly have transformed. I really hope that members and or new members we may be seeing join the LNS approach will be there with us at the IX event, because we have a Future of Industrial Work industry panel, not one where you'll just hear us speaking, but we engage the entire audience. And I really want to see a full array of folks across industry verticals there with us.
Thank you, Allison.
Chicago.
Thank you.